Did Fry's Quakerism affect his business practices or his relationship with the slave trade?
The aim of the module was to introduce us to a unique way of undertaking research, particularly with the theme of place, and in this case Bristol, which was the location of our fieldwork. We began our research with careful and detailed questioning of place by looking at readings such as Perrick's place writing and Miles Chambers' poem. Further research and learning throughout the module led us to more open-ended inquiries, and as we delved deeper down our lines of inquiry, we discovered our rabbit hole question. The new method of questioning and thinking we developed through this module has given us a new lens and way of thinking which could be useful in the future. The diagram on the left, drawn by Professor Ian Cook, shows how the lines of inquiry can connect and is a visual representation of the rabbit hole metaphor, a key concept for our work. The drawing on the right shows how we interpreted this diagram and translated our own ideas into a mind map, which was a useful reference to us in the latter stages of our group project. In the 1730s, Bristol was the busiest trading port in Britain and played an important role in the British Empire and the transatlantic slave trade. Following down the slavery route, we got interested in sugar from looking at the historical records. We found these records from the British Online Archives website released by the Bristol office, and it was from here we discovered that sugar was one of the most frequent imports from the Caribbean and West Africa to Bristol, where the sugar was then refined, during the time periods of 1770 to 1917. Then further research from week 2 of forced labour led us to finding information about Perrault, who was enslaved by a merchant, John Pinney, who made him work on sugar plantations in Nevis, a small Caribbean island. He was bought for 115 sterling on the 4th of July 1765. Pinney was a significant figure in the Bristol slave trade and joined the Bristol West India Society in 1786, who recently created a group of the most influential businessmen in the city with Caribbean connections. The society lobbied against the abolition of the slave trade and slave emancipation. The slave trade played an essential role in the mass farming of the raw materials that make up chocolate.
Over time, the popularity, affordability and production of chocolate increased. Farming of the raw materials that make up chocolate using forced labour in South America, West Africa and the Caribbean meant that the newfound demand for chocolate was met. Initially, chocolate was introduced to Europe through the Spanish conquest of modern-day Mexico in the 16th century, but the labour-intensive process of making the product soon meant that local farmers turned to more efficient production of chocolate through slave labour. The mass production of chocolate in the 19th century, which was enabled through the introduction of machines such as the cocoa press, led to the popularity of chocolate to increase as it moved away from being a luxury beverage to a more affordable everyday item. In order to match the demand for chocolate, slave labour was essential in cutting costs and for companies to be able to sell chocolate at market rates. As a result of this, cocoa was established as a commodity crop, where slaves farmed raw materials and then were shipped across the Atlantic Oceans to be manufactured and sold to consumers.
We discovered Fry's chocolate after using a Google Scholar search following our investigation of the slave trade in Bristol and, in particular, the export of sugar in week 2. This then led us to questioning where the first Joseph Fry sourced his sugar and cocoa that he was trading from 1756. Thus, we decided to focus our rabbit hole on the company J.S. Fry & Sons, although it was not named this until 1822. Originally sold as a drink for its health benefits, the apothecarist Fry partnered with John Vaughan to sell cocoa and went on to form Fry, Vaughan & Co. in 1761. His son, also Joseph Fry, went on to patent an effective cocoa grounding technique using the James Watt steam engine, which allowed for more efficient business. The greatest expansion of business, however, came under Joseph Store Fry II, the great-grandson of the first Joseph Fry. This was the beginning of the industrialisation of chocolate, with the business moving to Union Street in Bristol, employing over 3,000 workers who worked to mass produce the famous Fry's chocolate cream. By 1847, Fry had created the first solid chocolate bar, and although far later, the company invented the cream egg.
In truth, we had put our investigations into Fry on the back burner due to meeting too many dead ends. It was serendipitous that whilst visiting the M Shed in Bristol, we stumbled upon a display detailing Fry's legacy and relationship with chocolate and that city. Perhaps even more surprising was stumbling across the bust of Joseph Store Fry II in the M Shed archives. It seemed as though the city had offered this investigation into Fry on a silver platter. We discovered that the first of Fry's factory was on Union Street, but we were somewhat disheartened not to see anything commemorating the site. However, using the Know Your Place website, we were able to see the site during the 19th century. Unfortunately, we were unable to visit the new factory, as we would have had to travel by bus, which was not factored into the risk assessment.
Joseph Fry was born into a family of Quakers. During the 18th century, alcohol was relied upon as water was often contaminated and tea and coffee expensive. Alcohol would also ease the pain of working long days, so Fry turned to making drinking chocolate as a less harmful alternative. Quakerism also impacted the ways in which the J.S. Fry and Sons business operated. Before every working day, employees met for a Bible reading, hymn and prayer, and effort was put into employees having excellent working conditions. A nurse and doctor were also employed to improve working conditions. Also Quakers were Rowntree and Cadbury, two of Fry's biggest rivals. During the 1780s, the abolition of slavery began. Dresser describes how the abolition was led by William Wilberforce in Parliament and was supported by Quakers, so from this we are presuming that all three companies would have been involved. However, in 1906, Henry Nevinson wrote articles about the cocoa plantations on Sao Tome, an area he labelled as a slave economy and the islands of doom. Cadbury was found to have cocoa imports from there, resulting in a large scandal, and as a result, Cadbury prohibited all cocoa obtained from Sao Tome. If Cadbury saw some of their cocoa from slave plantations, despite being Quakers, it led us to asking the question as to where Fry sourced theirs. When digging deeper, we found that Fry had correspondence with the Portuguese government, along with Cadbury, about the working conditions on Sao Tome and Principe. The article Is It Slavery describes that the company was deeply distressed by the wretched working conditions, that they boycotted cacao from those parts until the situation improved. We were, however, still unable to locate any further sources of where Fry sourced their cocoa.
The next steps we would take in order to answer our proposed research question would be the following. Go to Fry's chocolate factory and ask questions, look at leaflets, speak to the staff. Conduct deeper research on archives to see if there was any evidence of Fry importing sugar and cocoa, as well as where they were exported from and imported to. For further insight and information about Fry's Quakerism impacting his business practice, we could try and get contact with past employers, as this would enable us to hear first-hand accounts and the workers' personal experience and insight. And we could also look further into the abolition of slavery and Quakerism.
Our visit to Bristol ignited a stream of questions, and one of the most pertinent queries we have is the role women played in Bristol's chocolate industry. We discovered an article on Review in History about the book Chocolate, Women and Empire, A Social and Cultural History by Emma Robertson. In it, she writes, "In the mythology of chocolate, the power relations of production and consumption are subsumed by a more attractive narrative of exotic peoples and their surroundings. Chocolate seems to generate a particular type of history writing, one which delves into the realms of fantasy and romance." Barbara Bush suggests that there is a strong gender perspective to consider when examining chocolate, given that women are so integral in the manufacturing, consumption and marketing in Britain. Bearing this in mind, we were interested to examine the relationship between Quakerism, Fry and women. Our research uncovered a Quaker writer, Matilda Sturge, who was born in Bristol in 1829, 4 years before slavery was abolished in the UK. During her life, she wrote articles and essays about prevalent Quakers, including the prison reformer Elizabeth Fry, a relation of the Fry family, in Types of Quaker Womanhood. It was through this discovery that we were interested in examining the relationship between women, chocolate and Quakerism in the city of Bristol.
The infographic shows the route our research took. Initially, we were introduced to descriptive and emotional place-based writing through Perrick and Miles Chambers' poem Bristol, Bristol. We furthered our research by looking into Bristol's shipping records and archives and how this was tied into the slave trade, leading us to discover significant merchants such as John Pinney. We then went down the rabbit hole to discover the intertwined history of chocolate manufacturing and slavery. This led us to discover that J.S. Fry and Sons was a Quaker-run business, so we researched how their views impacted the production of chocolate and how it was run based on Quakerism. We used our Bristol field class to visit significant places that we discovered during our research, such as the M Shed, which contained information on the chocolate industry and slavery, and Union Street, which was where J.S. Fry and Sons factory was first set up. This allowed us to develop our rabbit hole question to become more niche. We want to conduct further research into the involvement of women in the chocolate industry.
We taste tested 3 different bars of Fry's chocolate. Our favourite was peppermint cream.